week's episode of the Amazon Wholesale Podcast is actually a snippet of a recent episode that I recorded for the Ecom Unlimited podcast. Now, the Ecom Unlimited podcast is hosted by my good friends Cajua Robinson and Josh Dambam. It is one of the best podcasts out there, specifically focused on Amazon Wholesale. They go into other e-commerce tips and tricks as well, but if you guys are interested in more content around Amazon Wholesale, check out Ecom Unlimited, subscribe to them. It's a fantastic show and it comes out every single week. So I'm going to put links in the description if you're watching on YouTube, or in the show notes if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, where you guys can link directly to their show, check them out, subscribe, and be sure to tell them I sent you because it's a fantastic show. Now, before we jump into the episode, a very quick word from the sponsor of this week's episode, Seller Snap. So I want you guys to ask any advanced wholesale seller that's been in the game for a long time what repricer they're using, and I can virtually guarantee that they're using Seller Snap. There really isn't any sort of comparable option out there for advanced sellers. Now, people think that Seller Snap is only for advanced sellers, but this actually couldn't be further from the truth, because Seller Snap has an accelerator program that's geared towards sellers doing less than $25K per month in revenue, where they actually get full access to Seller Snap's repricing tool at a hugely reduced monthly cost for 6 full months. So if you're a smaller seller, if you're doing less than $25K per month in revenue, but you want access to the best repricer on the market, then you can apply for the accelerator program and just watch as it pays for itself in a matter of days. So if you want to take Seller Snap for a spin, you can use the code BRANDROCKET, which is all one word, at checkout for 15% off your first 3 months. And by the way, this is the biggest discount that Seller Snap offers. You cannot get this 15% off anywhere else. So again, that code is BRANDROCKET, all one word, at checkout for 15% off your first 3 months of Seller Snap. All right, let's get right into the episode.
It's your boy Kaj here with my co-host Josh, and today our guest is Corey Ganem. Corey, how you doing, bro?
Good, man. Yeah, thanks for having me on here. I'm looking forward to talking shop here for a little bit.
Yes, sir. So it's funny because I was just on your podcast, and I've been on your podcast 3 times. But for some reason, this is the first time we've got you on our podcast, but it's good to have you.
Well, how many episodes in are you guys again?
We started in January, and I believe this is going to be around episode 20, maybe episode 19, nice. Maybe 21, somewhere in there.
That's solid. So you've been doing one a week, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. One a week. And I think our first one was the first Monday in January.
Nice.
Yep. So been going strong. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but you've been super consistent with it, which is good.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's just start out, how we normally start our episode. How did you get into e-commerce, selling physical products online?
Yeah. So I got into it actually a lot earlier on than probably most people. Back in like early high school and like late middle school days, I would kind of sell one-off stuff on eBay. So stuff that we had around the house, or stuff that, I'd buy from like a yard sale, stuff like that. Was kind of just flipping it on eBay. And then fast forward to my senior year of college, I started getting a little more active in buying stuff off Facebook Marketplace and then turning around and flipping it on eBay. And around that time is when I discovered Amazon. Like, I didn't even know you could sell on Amazon at all up until that point. And so did like a super deep dive into like how it works, the process, everything. This was during my second semester of senior year of college. And then once I graduated, I hit the ground running, started selling books on Amazon, did books for a couple of months, then transitioned into online arbitrage, which, I mean, as you guys know, is just when you buy stuff from retail websites and then turn around and flip it on Amazon. Did that for about a year and a half until early 2019, which is when I found Wholesale, which is my current business model, which is where we buy products in bulk directly from the manufacturer or an authorized distributor and then sell those on Amazon. So it's been definitely a journey, and we've engaged in a lot of different business models, a lot of different ways of selling online, but it's been fun. I think next month will be 7 years. I think May 22nd will be 7 years since I started selling on Amazon, which is crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that is wild. And I think we're at a similar point. It's either like 6 or 7 years, which just feels absolutely crazy. It's like, it's actually becoming a little bit of a career.
Yeah, totally. And it's changed so much since we started back in 2017. And I mean, it continues to change pretty much by the day. So it's a fun industry to be a part of.
For sure. Now, going back to, the not the early days, but I guess the middle days when it when you realize the proof of concept, you realize that I can actually make a living off of this. What was that transition like for you? Thinking about leaving your job, because I know you had a corporate job at one point. Like, what was that transition like?
Yeah, so I mean, I really didn't like my job that much, so I was kind of looking for any excuse to do something else, and I'd been selling on Amazon kind of just casually on the side for, I mean, what, a year and a half at that point. And so I just decided to kind of look deeper into it. And that's when I just like around that time when I, got deeper into Amazon, started wanting to do it more full time, is when I discovered wholesale. That's kind of the impetus that made me want to like leave my job. Because I found a video on YouTube. It was a Watch Me Amazon video from like late 2019 or like early 2019 or late 2018, where he kind of breaks down like the economics of wholesale. He's like, hey, you spend 5K on profitable inventory, it comes back as 6K. You spend 6K, it comes back as 7,200, right? And on kind of the snowball goes. So that was really what I saw the business model as. I was like, oh, if we have some starting capital, then we can kind of just like snowball our money like this. And so that's when like I put in some money up front. My dad matched me on that investment. And I honestly wasn't even making hardly any money at all, like on Amazon at the time. I just was fed up with my job. So I kind of just quit, like moved back home, like across the country and kind of went at Amazon full time at that point. And that was like summer of 2019. Yeah, summer of 2019.
And just quit your job, went all in, and no turning back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess technically I turned back a little bit because so that was July of 2019 is when I moved back, quit my job, moved back home, started trying to make a go of wholesale full time, get to like November of 2019 and just really wasn't making that much money. It was down to like, I think it was like my last $1,000 in my savings account. So I realized I'm like, all right, if I'm going to keep doing this, like I've got to figure out another way to kind of like support myself while I continue to do this on the side. So I got a job at my uncle's insurance agency in Raleigh, which is I moved to Raleigh, like new town, started working there for him and then running Amazon on the side. This was, I think I started that job January of 2020. Everybody knows what happens in March, obviously with COVID. And then, but that really is kind of what accelerated the Amazon business. So by August of 2020, I had pretty much left that insurance agency role and gone into Amazon full time for the second time. And so I've been full time since then, which is August of 2020.
Got it. Okay. And that's interesting because we also started in 2017, but we just hit our first 7-figure year last year, 2023. And I know your last year you did like 3 million or 4 million, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think like 3.2.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I didn't go full time into this business until like the end of 2021. And we didn't really start seeing big results until 2022. So it's interesting how like, even though we started at the same time, like where we are now is very much correlated to when we started putting full-time effort onto the business.
Yeah, totally. And everybody's journey is super different, right? So like there's guys right now that are doing like 7 figures and they haven't been selling for a full year, right? So some guys like learn and scale really quickly, and other people it takes longer. But I know that when we started back in 2017, there wasn't nearly the amount or the quality of knowledge that's out there today. So not that it's certainly not easier to scale. Like if you're a new seller, it's easier in some ways and harder in others, right? Like it's easier in the sense that there's a lot more information out there, but it's harder in the sense that like there is more competition and fees are higher and everything, compared to when we started. So it's like there's never going to be a better time to start than now, because like there's always going to be something in your favor and something working against you.
Yep. So what has your revenue been over the years?
So in, I think 2019, which is the first full year of wholesale, we did like 292K. 2020 was 990K. 2021 was 3.3 million, or I think 3 million, or like 3.3. 2022 was 4.3. 2023 was 3.2. Because what we found in the year that we did like the 4.3 million is that, revenue was super high, but our margin wasn't, we were profitable, but it wasn't high enough to where it made sense, right? So last year really is when we focused on like, all right, let's kind of cut the SKU count. Let's focus on quality. Let's focus on profit. And even more so now in 2024.
Yeah, profit's so key. A lot of people can just look at that top line number and just assume that they're making a whole bunch of money. And then they dive into their numbers. And next thing you know, they're not making as much as, they feel. And then their cash flow actually gets hindered, which isn't great.
Exactly.
Now, did you use basically wholesale throughout all those years, or did you sprinkle in any other sort of any business types like OA or RA in those years?
Yeah. So, and I started kind of with OA. That's what I did from like August of 2017 up until I started wholesale in January 2019. So I did OA for, almost a year and a half. And still, even when I started wholesale, there were still a couple of OA products that I was continuing to sell just because they were easy replens.
Yeah.
But yeah, wholesale has been my only focus since that beginning of 2019.
Yeah. And like just kind of go into some reasons why you like wholesale more than all those other options, like online arbitrage and retail arbitrage.
Yeah, I think wholesale is a superior business model for a number of reasons. So one, the scalability, right? With online arbitrage, it might take you a whole week or even 2 weeks to spend, let's say 30K or 50K on good profitable inventory. But with wholesale, you can spend that much money on profitable inventory with a single text message, right? So a lot more scalable when it comes to both your time and just in general being able to get your hands on enough products. Two, it is, some people will say it's lower margin than arbitrage. And I think in general that is true. But at the same time, there are tons of great brands out there, whether you work directly with a brand or you're buying from a distributor, that have decent margins. There are a couple of brands in particular. One brand direct account of ours, our average margin is 25, 26%. And these are really high sale price products. So they're super profitable. So, some people might claim it's lower margin. I don't necessarily agree with that. And then the third reason why I really think it's superior is that it's a relationship business, right? Whereas, you can make the argument that private label is a relationship business as well. I guess you've got to have a relationship with your factory and, your designer or whoever helps you with your branding, right? Relationships are always going to be important. But with wholesale, it's everything. And your relationships can be, one, they can be your moat, right? So if you have a good relationship with a supplier or a sales rep, it can kind of prevent other people from gaining that access. And two, it can, if you're good at building relationships and if you're good at sales, then it can be a way to kind of like shortcut your progress and get inside some accounts that other people might not be able to access. So for all those reasons listed, I think it's a superior business model than definitely to an arbitrage, but also to something like private label as well.
Yeah, that's really insightful. That's great. Now that you're running like a $4 million business, what does your team structure look like?
So right now so on the Amazon side, I've got 4 employees, and then I have my executive assistant. So the executive assistant is based in Nigeria. She's not really involved in the business itself. She's more so involved in just like keeping my personal affairs organized and my schedule organized and my email. But on the Amazon side, we've got head of operations who's in the Philippines. She is managing pretty much the entire day-to-day, everything from shipments to purchase orders to repricing, handling a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the business. And then second employee would be our admin, and he's also based in the Philippines. He is doing things like invoices, keeping our databases intact, making sure information is being entered where it's supposed to be entered, and kind of just keeping the admin side of the business running smoothly. And then we have 2 sourcing employees, also both based in the Philippines, and they're each 20 hours a week, and they are just pretty much always scouting for products, looking for profitable products, reviewing price lists, reviewing wholesaler leads, just have their eyes on products for 4 or 5 hours a day.
Nice. Now you're like talking through all these employees in terms of, well, you only have 4, but in terms of like how long have they been with you? I feel like a lot of people kind of like VA here, VA there goes a VA, they weren't doing that great. There goes another VA. Oh, they didn't do great this month, or they're on a 3-month lull. Like, how did you go about kind of making sure that they were the right fit for you?
Yeah, so I guess head of operations has been with me since November of 2019. So I guess 4.5 years. Admin is coming up on 2 years. Executive assistant is just over a year. And then the 2 sourcing employees, we actually just hired them probably 2 months ago because they were new roles. Like, we didn't have anybody in those roles previously. But and your question, what was your question exactly? Like, how do you kind of retain them?
Yeah, retain and kind of continue to incentivize them as best as you can.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of retention, it's like kind of simple stuff, but it's a lot of people don't do it. It's setting good expectations up front, so onboarding them properly, holding them accountable, whether that's via a daily meeting or a weekly meeting, or even just communication over something like Slack or WhatsApp, and then also incentivizing them, so paying them well. I pay head of operations makes I think $12 an hour, and she works 55 hours a week. So again, she's based in the Philippines, so $12 an hour there is like a really, really high wage. And to quote her in her words, she said, I went from being like, am I going to be able to put food on the table to what kind of food do I want to put on the table, right? So she makes a lot of money. And then again, incentivizing them, holding them accountable, checking in with them and giving them feedback is really what you do to retain really good people.
Yeah, that's really good. I think a lot of people just think, you can just hire a VA and they can do exactly what you want. And there doesn't have to be a ton of like communication or expectations. And they just think they're going to get, these great leads all the time, just feeding them that they can spend money on and they can churn. But whenever you hire someone, it really is important to, make sure they understand what's going on, know exactly how to do what you want them to do so that they can do it properly and they can grow your business.
Totally. And a really good virtual employee is not going to come that way as soon as you hire them. You're going to have to make them that way, right? So like I put in literally 100, probably, maybe even 1,000+ hours over the last 4.5 years, just training my head of operations in the form of Loom videos, giving her feedback on products that she's finding, Zoom calls, showing her how to manage or how to tweak the repricer, for example. Like our Google Drive is filled with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of video recordings of trainings that I've done with every member of the team over the years. So it definitely is something that, like, if you find a really good person who's smart and they can communicate and they're proactive and that, they're just a good person, they have the intangibles, it's actually like a lot easier to teach them the actual tasks and like the business stuff that you need them to do.
That's great. That's fantastic. That's great advice. Now, going kind of transitioning here into like more of like the capital phase. As we get in Amazon, we're always spending money on inventory, trying to build our bankroll up to improve revenue and improve profits. What are some tactics that you use to get access to more capital?
So I like to use, we have a line of credit with our bank. So this is a bank that we've been banking with for like 4 or 5 years now, maybe longer. They're just a regional bank out of Eastern North Carolina. And because we've done business with them in the form of just like having checking and savings accounts and other loan products as well, they were more than willing to lend us a line of credit on the Amazon business. So it's, having good relationships with banks or like credit unions, ideally local or regional ones, is going to be your best opportunity for funding. We have taken Amazon loans in the past. We definitely spend all of our inventory spend on credit cards, but we pay that statement balance every month. We never pay interest there. And another good option, if your vendor requires cash, is to use something like Melio. And so Melio allows you to, I can pay with a credit card, but my vendor gets cash, and Melio charges me a 2.9% fee to do that. And the great thing about some of the cash back credit cards that we use, for example, like the Chase Ink Business Premier, that Chase Ink Business Premier gives unlimited 2.5% cash back on any purchases over $5K. So if I use that card to send cash to my vendor via Melio, then if Melio charges me 2.9%, but I get 2.5% cash back, then I'm only paying, let's say net, right, 0.4% is what that nets out to. Yeah. And I don't have to part with my cash, right? I can put that on the credit card and extend the life of that cash a little longer.
Nice. Now, what is your current credit card stack look like right now?
So we use for inventory spend, we use Capital One Spark and Chase Ink Business Premier, right? Those are both cashback focused cards. Those are going to be two of the best cashback offers on the market. And then for operating expenses, we use an Amex Gold card. For shipping and prep expenses, we use, I think, the Amex Business Blue is what we use there.
Gotcha. Did you ever run into like credit limitations or anything like that? And if you did, how did you get around that?
Yeah, so we have run into credit limitations all the time. In fact, we're dealing with that this week, in the sense that, you know, we want to purchase inventory, credit card limit's not high enough. So sometimes it's a game of like paying down the credit card and then letting the vendor run it. And sometimes it's a game of, you know, spreading spend out on the multiple credit cards. But sometimes, you know, you get into a cash flow crunch and you kind of just gotta sit tight, be disciplined with your sourcing, and get some cash back.
Gotcha. Did you get anywhere with like ever like reaching out with any of them, trying to get limits increased, or were they pretty like, was there a lot of pushback against that at all?
So yeah, usually it's good to request an increase every like 3 to 6 months or so.
Gotcha.
But in general, you know, as long as your financials look good, once you get above a certain threshold, they're going to want to see like tax returns, profit and loss statements, that type of stuff. But as long as your info looks good, they'll continue to give you reasonable increases.
Gotcha. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Now go ahead, Kaj.
No, you got it.
Kind of pivoting into wholesale a little bit.
Okay, just kidding. If you're going to pivot, then I got it.
All right, go ahead.
I thought you're going to. I have another question on the finance topic, because you mentioned, so you would quit your first job and then you were all in on Amazon, and then you started working for your uncle again because your savings account was low, and then you did that for a little bit. So I want to get a little bit of insight into what you realized about cash flow when you first started to pay yourself, right? Because you talked about that Larry video that you saw where he's saying you put in 5 and it turns to 6, then it turns to 72, so on and so forth. But that doesn't happen if you're taking money out. So just talk about like what you learned in that process, trying to become actually self-employed.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I learned early on is that it was going to take a lot more cash than I realized to like really scale the business. So that's something that you got to keep in mind, is like when I say we did 290K year 1, 900K year 2, like 3 million year 3, it's because we were reinvesting every single dime back into the business. So I was really taking minimal cash out for the first probably like 3.5 years. And so that's kind of what it takes to really scale, unless you're just taking on a ton of debt and financing it that way, which I don't necessarily recommend. So, you know, once we had reinvested a lot of money into the business, we decided like, all right, maybe it's time to take a little bit of money off the table. That's when I started taking a higher salary. That's when we implemented Profit First, which is, you know, a financial system for where you can, you know, they do exactly what it says, take your profit first, and then, you know, kind of approach it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to bring that up because I've shared this story before, but we ran into similar issues, you know, when I first went into the business full time. And even now, just realizing like every dollar you take out into payroll is just more money you can't put into inventory. So it will slow down your growth. It's possible, but just making sure that people understand. And this is, you know, something I talk with people all the time when they're asking me questions about it, like how to pay themselves, is you don't want to be, if you're profiting, you know, a couple grand a month, you don't want to be taking all of that profit out, because that's, even though it's profit, with the way how cash flow works, you're not selling all your inventory all your time, and that's just going to absolutely destroy your cash flow. So the longer you can put off taking money out of the business, the quicker you're going to be able to grow, and you're not going to run into cash flow issues right away.
Totally. Exactly. And that's something, you got to keep in mind. It's like, all right, do I want to like employ delayed gratification, or do I want immediate gratification? And in general, the longer you can, the more you can delay that gratification and keep putting that money in and take as little bit out as possible, the quicker you're going to scale. And like the more, you know, the more long-term your rewards are going to be down the road.
100%. Yeah. Okay. Now, the pivot that Josh wanted to do kind of into wholesale questions. I'll ask the first one. How many suppliers were you originally, like when you first started doing wholesale outreach, how many suppliers were you contacting a day, a week?
So I remember like the very first day that I contacted suppliers, what I was doing is I had a Google sheet where I'd make a list of, let's say, 20 to 30 brands at a time that were qualified. And I'd call those 20 to 30, and then I'd find 20 or 30 more. Then I'd call those and I'd call more. And then, but you got to keep in mind, so that was like each day, right? So I was calling probably 20 to 30 per day for at least a couple of weeks. And what I found is that ended up snowballing into like a huge workload because, you should be following up with the ones that you call. So it's like, all right, if I call 20 to 30 new ones per day, I've still got to follow up with the, 100 or more that I called last week. And so after a while, it just became a game of like, all right, let me keep following up with the ones I've contacted. And it probably took me between like 100, 150 different brands that I had to reach out to land that first profitable account. And then, I mean, from there, it was just like a numbers game. I was like, all right, I'm going to call, 150 more to land the next one. And I mean, these days it should be easy. You should be landing profitable accounts at better odds than like 1 in 150 with all the information out there these days. But that's kind of how it was back then for me. It was more just like brute force, trial and error. Let's find one that works.
And your main method for finding the ones to contact was doing Google, or did you use?
I mainly used, so for finding brands, I was actually doing a lot of like storefront stalking, kind of like reverse sourcing of, all right, let me identify a bunch of big sellers that I have a feeling are wholesale sellers. Let me see what brands they're carrying, and let me go through and maybe pick out some ones that are interesting to me, that look like they have, that they'd be friendly to resellers.
Got it. Okay.
Interesting. Now, when you first started, contacting suppliers and started kind of putting your POs together, what did they kind of look like in dollar amount? Was it like your first one was like a $10,000 PO, 5,000? Like how much was it actually?
Yeah, good question. So I don't even remember like our very first PO, what it was for. I think I remember the brand it was with, but I don't remember the amount. But I know it wasn't, it had to be like, between 1 and 3K, maybe max. And that's because I was starting with more capital than probably most people start with. I think I had around like 20, 25K to start with. So like, yeah, an opening PO would have been in the like $500 to like 2 to 3K range.
Gotcha. So you don't need like 10K, 20K to be able to kind of do this business model.
No, not at all. And that's something that I think a lot of people have that false belief of, oh, if I'm going to get into wholesale, I got to have all this cash. When in reality, like I tell people, ideally you would have 5 to 10K in cash, right, to start with for inventory. But I do know people that have started with less and been successful. At the same time, I know people that have started with 50K, 100K and not been successful because they're just not following the fundamentals. They're just not willing to do what it takes to scale this business. So it's less about the capital that you have and more about like the mindset and the tactics that you're going to employ.
Yeah, that's such good advice. That's so great. Now, how many suppliers do you currently kind of supply with to have or to run this like $4 million business? So like, what does it look like? Is it like 80 suppliers and 10 brands? Is it like, talk a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So you're asking like the number of suppliers different suppliers that we work with?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could buy from, let's just say at any given point in time, there's probably like 10 to 15 that we bought from relatively recently that we could go and buy profitable products from at any given point in time. But there's like 3 to 5 main ones, really like 3 or 4 main ones that we're doing like all of our spend with recently. Gotcha. And so, I mean, at this point, like if we wanted to, that we could consolidate that to one, because I mean, there's some, you guys know, I'm sure you guys have suppliers like this where it's like, all right, if I really wanted to focus all my efforts on this one supplier, I could spend all my money with them, right? Like easily. But I mean, we know that kind of the risk that entails with, if something happens or your sales rep leaves or, something unfortunate happens, then you've kind of put all your eggs in that basket. So I think having like 3 to 5 really good ones is the way to go.
Gotcha. And so are you kind of saying that like one supplier could potentially change your life?
100%. Yeah. I mean, that is definitely the case. And that was like, for me, that was that very first, it wasn't our first profitable brand direct account, but it was like probably the second or third brand direct account that I got that just happened to be located in the same city that I was located in. Got to go in and meet the owner, meet like his number 2 person, ended up placing, I think like 2 or 3K order with them like that day on the spot. That was like my second ever wholesale account. And yeah, I mean, that was my second ever profitable account. So yeah, it just took, and that once a brand we worked with for like 3.5 years, ended up eventually getting an exclusive on some of their better products. Yeah, so that was a great like, well, I guess second supplier.
So, and you're still working with them?
No, not anymore. So they just pretty much put Amazon on the back burner. Like when I say that they were in every possible position to scale, especially during COVID, they had a golden opportunity and just completely fumbled the bag. Like they were at the point where they were filling like these little, maybe like $500, like 2K brick and mortar POs, like during COVID when they were really struggling with production. So they had limited supply. And we're out here placing like 30, 40, 50K POs to send to Amazon, where the stuff is like, as soon as it checks in, it's selling. And they just didn't see the big picture. And so they're super old school. It kind of just fell apart from there. So I was like, listen, if you guys aren't going to invest in the channel, like neither are we. And that's kind of where we left it.
Oh, you should have just bought the brand.
Yeah,
I'd love to. And it's funny because my cousin said the same thing. He's like, dude, you should like make an offer to buy them. And I think I did mention that because I used to go see them once a year. Like I flew to Chicago, I think 2 or 3 times to see them and like, hang out, just talk and just show face. And I think I asked him one time, I was like, would you ever sell? Because I think it was his dad that started it. And he was like, no way, like never.
Okay. It's like a
so
family.
I'm just like, yeah, it was like a family business. So I didn't even bother.
Oh, that hurts. Oh man. It happens.
Yeah, I know.
What has been the single largest PO you've placed to date?
Single largest, I think that might have been, it was either for like last year we did a big one for some ceiling fans. I think it was like 110 or 120, something like that. And then there's one that we do like with one of our brand direct accounts. I mean, we've spent 6 figures with them a couple of times, like 100, 105 maybe. But yeah, I'd say probably those two.
Now, kind of like logistically, when you go and spend, 6 figures with a brand, does that all go straight to Amazon, or do you use like a 3PL to kind of help with that transition to move that product?
So this brand, the one I'm just referred to, like they ship directly to Amazon. So they'll ship all that. And then the ceiling fans, they had to go to a 3PL.
Gotcha. Okay. That's pretty cool.
Are you using all 3PLs, doing any prep yourself? What does that side of your operation look like?
Yeah, so using 3PLs 100%. So we've got 2 that we work with on the East Coast, 1 in Oregon, and then, I mean, kind of just like a bunch in the back pocket, like 1 down in Tech. Like we don't do any buying out of the Midwest or anything, but it's like, hey, if we needed a 3PL in Texas for some reason, then I know people where we could kind of spin that up pretty quickly. But it's primarily 2 on the East Coast and 1 on the West Coast.
Got it. And I know at one point you did have your own warehouse kind of operation, but then you decided to pivot away from that, right?
Yeah, so that was back in 2021, I want to say, like early 2021, or maybe it was like late 2021. We bought a warehouse it was like in Wake Forest, North Carolina, so kind of like a smaller town. Tough to find people to work, tough to get to because I was having to drive like 40 minutes there one way each day. And also I just like sucked at managing a warehouse and it just like wasn't fun. So I was like, all right, let's outsource this to a 3PL. So we actually sold that warehouse, and then we've been using 3PLs ever since. And like I said, I want to say that was like, no, I think it was like mid or early 2022 when we sold the warehouse.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And then, using 3PLs, we've done both as well. We've done some in-house prep, still do a little bit of in-house prep, but now we're transitioned almost fully to 3PLs. And just having that flexibility is so nice. You're going to pay a premium for it, but in my opinion, it's totally worth it.
It's so much better. If you can find a really good 3PL, it's so worth it because, I mean, think about all the time you have back now to spend on sourcing or raising capital or like the stuff that actually moves the needle. Like the warehouse work, well, yes, it's critical. Like it's got to be done. It doesn't move the needle in any way. Like you focusing on that adds no value to your business.
Yep. Especially when you can outsource it for $1 or less per unit.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard some big sellers talking about like what their prep cost is per product. These guys that have like huge warehouse operations, and we're paying like maybe 20 cents more per unit. And it's like, okay, obviously at scale that adds up big time, but I'm sorry, you're not going to, I'm not going to chain myself to a warehouse for the next decade to save 20 cents a unit. Like I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. And it doesn't really, and like you said, at scale, and when I'm thinking at scale for that amount per unit, it doesn't really make sense until you're doing 8 figures, or if you're selling stuff that's priced under $20. But if
Right.
you just
If you've got a really low average sale price, it's going to be way more important.
But if you're sticking with stuff that's higher price, $30, $40, $50 and up, and you're not doing 10 million in annual revenue, it mathematically it's not worth the extra stress, in my opinion.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. So again, similar to us, right? You've been selling since 2017, but I know some of your story, and for a long time you were just solo, and there weren't other Amazon sellers. You weren't plugged into the community. You weren't a celebrity on Twitter. At what point did you start getting active in the community, and how did that change your business?
Yeah. So probably, what was it? Beginning of last year, I want to say like January of 2023 is when I really started getting active on Twitter. And it started with Miles and Garrett featuring me on the Buy Box Bandits podcast. And they were like, oh, you got to start tweeting on Twitter, talking about wholesale. And so that's when I really started to make that a priority. And I mean, just business really exploded ever since I did that. Not only in terms of like, finding more suppliers, which I did because suppliers would reach out on Twitter, or growing your network of other people that can give you tips, right? Like, which is a fact. I mean, I've met hundreds of people in the last year and a half or so that have contributed in ways to my business that aren't even necessarily quantifiable. But just like the community in general, it's a really good thing to be a part of, especially a higher level one of people that can answer those nuanced questions that there's just not an answer for those on Google. And like even asking like casual sellers, like sometimes these questions aren't easily answerable unless it's by somebody that's kind of been in the trenches and been there. So building up those contacts has been super valuable.
Yeah. What would you say would be like the 3 things that really kind of propelled your social following? Because you really went from like 0 to hero pretty quick in terms of like your following. Like I would love to see it, like the graph over time, what it would look like, because you have built up a really decent following. What would be some tips that you would give maybe like some beginners who are trying to start networking in the space?
So, I mean, the first one is just going to be consistency. Like it's not sexy. It's so cliche, but it's a fact. Like I think at this point, April of 2024, I've written a thread or a long form post on Twitter every single day since I think August 22nd of last year. So like coming up on like 8 months now. So it's like literally just not missing days, whether that's just tweeting, writing a thread, whatever. 2 would be engaging on Twitter. So Twitter's similar to LinkedIn, where like posting is great and that'll get eyeballs, but it's like engaging under bigger guys' posts that kind of gets you noticed more, because if you don't have a lot of followers yet, well, the easiest way to get noticed is to comment on stuff where guys have a lot of followers. So if you're newer, like in the Amazon space, it'd just be like replying to my threads or Kaja's tweets, or, Josh's videos, like any stuff like that, but like insightful comments, not just like an emoji or something, right? Like a comment where somebody would read that and be like, oh, that contributes to the conversation. Let me click on this guy's profile and maybe see what he's about, and then maybe follow you. And then the third would just be, I think the third is like getting on video. I think that was huge because there's a lot of guys on Twitter that are good writers that write a lot, and you can gain a following that way. But I feel like people just trust other people that they can see a lot better. So it's just like months at this point, and I missed plenty of days, but in general, I try to just record I try to keep it under 40 seconds, just a quick video of like reflection, lesson learned, tip, anything like that, and just put it up on Twitter, put it up on Instagram stories. And so that kind of just establishes credibility, lets people see you. And again, just I think like endears people more to like you and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, like, what are like your future goals? Because I know you got like YouTube going now. What are your goals for socials over this year?
Yeah, so I mean, the main goal with socials is to build the email list, because I mean, just with any social platform, like they can change the algorithm or they can ban you, or something could happen where you lose your social following overnight. And if you haven't been building any owned traffic, like for example, your email list, or like even like a list of phone numbers where you could like text your subscribers, like that's the big asset. So the goal with socials is to push people to the email list. Like that's really the only goal. So that's like, as socials grow, I'm hoping that the email list grows along with it.
Gotcha. Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And now, as you grew on socials and got plugged in the community, not even just talking about, people following you, but like you said, engaging with other people, learning from other sellers, your business also grew in tandem with that. What are the advantages to a new seller or to an experienced seller of just being out there?
Because and Miles says this all the time, but it's like, your surface area of luck. It's like the more you put yourself out there, the more you talk about the business, the more you let other people kind of discover what it is that you're doing, the luckier you get, right? Whether that's somebody finds an opportunity and because you just happen to be on their timeline, they pass it to you, or because, hey, your cousin knows that you're the Amazon guy because you're talking about it on social media all the time. They happen to know a brand owner that's looking to launch on Amazon. Oh, here's an introduction, right? Like, it's just, there's so many thousands of good things that can happen by you putting yourself out there and just like being on the internet and talking about the business. And the downsides are like, it's zero. Like, there's zero. I can't think of a single one. So it's just like, when you have an opportunity that's so one-sided in the sense that like there's only benefits and zero drawbacks, maybe aside from like the time that it takes, then that's a bet that you want to make every time.
Could not agree more. And we've also experienced the exact same thing firsthand. Once we started getting plugged in, got some mentorship, also from you as well. It's like the business just started growing. It's something that's difficult to quantify. Like we said, when I was on your podcast, it's not like, oh, I make $10 every time I tweet, but
Right.
there is 100% a correlation between putting yourself out there, talking about the business, and the connections you make from that will directly impact the growth of your business, which is just like, it's so worth it.
Totally. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Now I got a quick question. Did you do any coaching for this? Or did you have a mentor through all this at all?
Like on the social media side?
More on like the wholesale Amazon side.
Oh, so the only like Amazon course or any information I paid for was Larry Labarsky, Watch Me Amazon. He dropped his course back in, I want to say it was like late 2019, or maybe it was early 2020. And I was one of the first people to buy that because he had the best content. He was one of the only people putting out wholesale content at the time. It was really high quality, and the course was as well. Like it was super valuable. I feel like I got every time I paid for it and more out of that. So, and that's something that, obviously as people like us, we sell information, we sell courses, coaching, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's important to, like, if you're going to buy coaching, if you're going to buy a course, make sure that the person that's putting that out there practices what they preach, is in the sense that like they are also buying courses and going through them. They are also paying for coaching. They are also paying to be parts of paid communities, right? Like there's a community of Amazon very high level Amazon sellers where I'm probably the smallest fish in the pond that I pay almost $8,000 a year to be a part of, right? So, when I turn around and tell somebody, hey, this is why you should join my community and here's what it costs, just know that I'm also on the other side, paying for communities, paying for access. That's something that I believe in as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could not agree more there. And I love being the smallest fish in the pond. It's like at every stage you get to, it's so easy to be like, oh, I figured this out. I don't need to learn anything else. I'm that guy, but then there's someone who's doing your yearly revenue in a month, in a week, or in a day. And you want to get around those people to understand how they think, learn how they run their business, and just think bigger. It's so valuable.
Yep. And it's super contagious too, because it's like when you start hanging out with those people, like you're naturally going to do more. Like it's pretty much impossible not to.
Yes.
Yeah. I also find like there's so many people, like we've had almost 20 people on the podcast, and each one of them has taken coaching. Like if you think you can do this without coaching, good luck, because you're going to run into so many issues that you're going to have no idea what to do, and you're going to be looking for someone to figure it out for you. So
exactly. Yeah. Anytime you can pay to shorten the timeline, like I said, it took me, 5 years to feel like I had a decent handle on the business. And, for other people that are kind of just starting out now. You see guys that are doing, 6 figures in month 3 because they had somebody kind of guide them along the way, or at the very least they were like a student of the game, soaking up all the free information out there. So that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah. And the other beautiful part about it is you don't need to pay to get started, right? There's so much free information out there now where you can figure it out on your own to see if you like the business in the first place, to get the proof of concept. And then if you're ready to really, full send and accelerate your learning curve, then you can bring in a mentor, bring in a coach to really get you to the next level.
Yep, totally. That's the way that anybody should start, is like start for free. And if you're serious about it and you really want to grow, then maybe seek out someone who can shortcut that learning curve for a price, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And we've been working on something, the Amazon Wholesale community and the coaching tier there. Do you want to speak a little bit about that for anyone that might be interested?
Yeah. So, and this has really been something that's kind of been, that's kind of come about over the last year and a half, because when I started on social media, like I said, beginning of last year, almost immediately I had people coming to me saying like, hey, do you offer coaching? Do you offer mentorship? Can you help me? Can you do this? Can you do that? And so for the longest time, there was, I'd answer their DMs and answer their questions that way, but I didn't really have any like formal way to help people grow their wholesale businesses, aside from the wholesale challenge, which is kind of separate. But that's when Kaj and I got together and said, hey, we're getting these inquiries all the time. Let's create a community of students who are interested in learning and growing their wholesale businesses and offer a way to help them grow, right? So that's a community that we just launched here a couple of weeks ago as of the date of this recording. And I mean, already, Kaj, like you see there in the Discord, there are guys that are placing that, joined within the last week that are placing POs. There's guys that are in there networking with each other, guys that ended up going to the same college that didn't even realize it, that are part of this community.
Yeah.
Like lots of really good people and really cool stuff going on, people growing their businesses pretty rapidly. So if people are interested in kind of having a conversation with us and hearing what that looks like, and we'll maybe evaluate to see if you're a good fit, they can find out more information at amazonwholesale.io. And that'll just redirect there to a Calendly link where you can book a call to discuss.
Yep. Yeah. And we'll have a link for that in the description as well. If you're interested, you can reach out to me and we can talk more for sure.
Yeah. So Corey, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, best place, or really the most information from me that you're going to find is going to be my YouTube. And I'm just at Corey Ganem on YouTube.
Gotcha. Awesome. All links will be posted in that description area. Guys, if you enjoy this, give it a like. And we here at Ecom Unlimited, we will see you next time.
Peace. Thanks, guys. See ya.